The good news about engagement and all the research that we have on that is there is just an airtight business case for doing that, right? That you can take to your board. That, you know, the ROI from increasing engagement is so obvious and so strong. You know, if you present the numbers in the right way, it's almost an offer that they can't refuse. I think a lot of boards don't believe it, they don't buy into it, they don't understand the value of engagement. But when they see the numbers, they do. Right? They really have to. That investing whatever it takes to get engagement where it needs to be will change the slope of your membership dramatically for now and forever.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Grype podcast. In this podcast, we learn how to grow member-based organizations. If this is your first time joining our podcast episode, I am Farhad Khan. I am the CEO of Grype Digital. We build membership websites for professional associations, and our product Member Lounge is one of the quickest way for you to build a membership website for your association membership. And we have actually distilled many years of member engagement knowledge into our product Member Lounge. So if you use Member Lounge for your membership website, then you can actually put your member engagement on autopilot, meaning you don't have to think much about it and engagement will just happen naturally. And we hold a number of learning events throughout the month. So if you want to learn about how you can grow your association membership, then please join one of our upcoming learning events. You can find our learning events at grype.ca/events. That is grype.ca/events. This is a live recording of our podcast with a live audience. We already received some amazing questions from the audience, but if you have any more questions during the episode, please submit them on chat on Zoom, and we will get to them as soon as we can. So in this episode, we are with Chris Vaughn. Chris is the Chief Strategy Officer of Sequence Consulting. Chris has over 20 years of experience working with associations. And one of Chris's key clients right now is the AARP. They're one of the largest associations in the world. And Chris actually had a lot to do with their member engagement. And just a fun fact about Chris, he's an avid traveler and he has visited, I think, over 60 countries. Can you imagine? Over 60 countries. Wow. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to start by telling us a bit about yourself and your work?
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. My wife and I started our careers in the big strategy world, right? We were partners in a big consulting firm for over 10 years. And we left that job in 2001 to start Sequence Consulting, focused almost entirely on associations and membership organizations. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One is we really felt that associations could benefit from a lot of the things that happened in big strategy that just wasn't accessible to them. We thought it should be. And we also really believe in the mission of associations. We think, associations change the world, and by helping associations get better, we make the world a better place. So 20 years later, we're still here and we're still married, believe it or not. Our mission has always been to help associations grow membership and revenue. And we've been lucky to work with some fantastic clients like AARP, American Medical Association, IEEE, American Bar Association, and many others, some of which we'll talk about today and some of the things that we've learned from them. We work with associations of all sizes here and around the world. We have clients in Australia and Brazil, Japan, and Taiwan. So we've had a good time for the last 20 years.
That's wonderful. And as an engineer, Chris, I used to be an IEEE member for a long time, and I have many complaints. Maybe I should file them with you.
I can tell you who to call.
Yeah, that's great. Alrighty. So for the audience, for this episode today, we will start by focusing on the big picture strategy to begin with, because Chris is really good on that. And then we will slowly drill down into the details and how we can actually use some of the tactics to get your member engagement going. All right. So Chris, you mentioned that it's really when we are looking about member retention, we shouldn't be looking at member retention alone, and then it should be the member engagement that leads to retention. Can you explain why and what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think a good place to start is, what do we mean by engagement, right? It's something we talk a lot about in the association world. And I think we usually talk about something from our side, right? Something that they've done with us. And we do better to think about it from their side, which is an experience of value. So we define engagement as a meaningful experience of value by a member. And it takes lots of forms. It could be really great content. It could be a product. It could be an experience, right? It could be interactions with other members. but it makes sense. The more of those value experiences you create, the more likely people are to renew, because they'll want to have more and more of those experiences. So in our experience, and we'll talk about some of the data, it is the number one driver of renewal. It's really the only driver that really matters. I want to be clear, though, engagement, it's not just about renewal, right? I mean, we want members to engage because that's how we execute our mission, right? We want to get the value from us. We want them to learn. We want them to engage. We want them to connect. So it's the mission of the organization. But renewal is where the hard numbers are. And so we really focus on, renewal is the best barometer of association engagement.
Right.
Okay. The data bears that out. There's a study, a dynamic benchmarking did a study. I recommend it. You can find it on their website. They're doing an update as we speak, so there should be a new version out in a few months. That shows across all kinds of associations, organizations that really focus on first year renewal see anywhere from a 6 to 12 point lift in their first year renewal rates. So if you were at an average of 58% to an average of 70%, which is enormous, right? That's an enormous lift. And the bigger the association, the better those results are. So there's a lot of data to prove this out, that the best way to improve retention is by focusing on engagement, especially early in the membership cycle. Right.
Chris, so what are some of the main challenges that associations face with member engagement right now, you think?
Yeah, there's a few. That one of the big ones is that a lot of associations don't track it, right? I mean, we haven't defined it well, and so they don't track if people are engaged or what they're engaged in. Ideally, and the very best organizations have an engagement score, right? So they can score their members on how engaged they are or not. And that's often a very accurate predictor of their likelihood to renew. Most associations haven't gotten that far, right? So they don't have the data or the metrics to say, are we doing a good job? Are we not doing a good job? What are they engaging in? What are they not engaging in? And how are those things correlated with renewal? So measuring engagement is key, and it's a real obstacle for a lot of folks. The other obstacle is they don't spend enough money on it, right? I mean, the dynamic benchmarking report showed, and I was even shocked to see this, 1%, right? Roughly 1% of association budgets are spent on member engagement, even though, and we'll talk more about this, it's probably the best investment they could possibly make. They tend to underinvest in it because we haven't done a good enough job making that value clear, right, to folks. So that's the other obstacle, is they don't have enough resources to work with. And the third, and people, this really is surprising to people. We find this again and again and again. A barrier to engagement is that members really don't know what you do, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's hard for people to take that in, because we do so many great things, right? And we offer so much value, and we do so much hard work, and all of it's good stuff. And we just assume that the members know as much about it as we do, but it's empirically untrue. We did a project with the American Medical Association where we asked that question. Well, what do members think that we do? And only 20% of the members could mention anything except the flagship journal, right? So they all knew about the Journal of American Medical Association and really didn't know about the dozens and dozens and dozens of other things that American Medical Association does that doctors really care about. We have seen this play out again and again and again in associations, that you can't engage with things that you don't know about, and associations always overestimate members' awareness of the things that they do. There's a piece we actually published, The Secret Reasons Why Members Don't Renew. You can see it on our website that goes into a little more detail about this and that case study.
Right. Yeah, and I guess we hear this a lot as well from associations, that their members are not engaged, and oftentimes when they interview members actually say that they didn't even know that this particular resource existed, right? So that's why we tell our association clients that marketing to your existing members about your current resources is equally important as recruiting new members, right? Otherwise, you cannot engage your members who do not know that your services actually exist. So you think that there has to be a dedicated investment in this area as well.
Absolutely. And not just the things that you do, the things that you stand for. I mean, you can engage in intangible things as well, right? For a lot of members, advocacy is a very engaging thing, right? They want to be involved in grassroots activities. For others, volunteering is a very engaging thing. They want to know more about that. They want to know what you're doing, and they want to be a part of it in the world. And it does. It requires focus and commitment and investment on communicating that effectively. But associations that can do that, they see the results, right? Engagement and renewal.
Fantastic. So Chris, this leads to my next question. You talked a lot about like lifetime value when we chatted earlier, right? So why is that important? Actually, what is lifetime value and why is it important?
Yeah, lifetime value is a way to think about the overall value, economic value of a member to an association over the life of the membership. And very simply, it's of the total amount that a member spends on average with you, on everything included, right? On dues, on events, on publications, on training, etc., divided by the numbers of members that you have, right? And the average tenure of a member. So if your total revenue derived from membership is $1 million a year, let's say, and you have 10,000 members, then your annual value of the member is $100 a year. That's sort of where you start. Mm. That's where a lot of associations stop, right? They think about the annual value or what's the value of the dues for this year, but that's the mistake. What you want to do is think about that $100 over the tenure of a member, right? How long are they going to stay with your association? And the reason that's important is because it tells you how much you should be investing in membership, right? It tells you the long-term value of a new member and the long-term value of a retention. So just to give you one example, we have a client we're currently working with. It's a very large engineering society. They're very fortunate. Their average member tenure is 18 years. So if someone joins the association, they're very likely to stay for 18 years. And their lifetime value of that member is about $2,600, right, over the course of that year. They spend almost nothing, right, on engagement, almost nothing on renewal, and the renewal rate is down to 66%, right? So we try to explain this is cause and effect. You're not investing enough in renewal. You're not investing because you don't see the upside. If you did the research to understand lifetime value, you would understand it's worth investing in that $2,600, right, over the course of the membership. It's much more than the $100 a year membership dues. It's an important mental shift for associations to make, and it's really the key to, I think, understanding the economic value of engagement to an association over time.
Right. And I guess like Chris, like you mentioned earlier in our chat, that it is much easier to sell to an existing member than to sign up a new member. And I guess like what I'm hearing is that like if you invest even a small amount of money, say $2,000 in member engagement, then that $2,000 like will be so whatever marketing you do will be spread across your membership, and maybe like more than one member will get engaged with the $2,000 that you're spending. And as a result, like you're actually working towards retaining every single member that you are keeping, meaning your dollar actually goes really far if you invest in member engagement.
Absolutely. And to your point about new members, it actually goes further than that. It's very expensive to acquire a new member. The rule of thumb is it generally costs about 1 year's dues to acquire a new member. It's much cheaper to renew a member. In fact, highly engaged members cost almost nothing to renew because they renew themselves, right? Hence the title of the podcast. But remember, new members don't renew very well, right? About half of your new members are not going to stick around for the second year. So that investment you made to get them on, about half of that will be wasted, right? If you renew a member once, maybe 2 times, the likelihood is they will renew forever, right? In the case of this client, for the next 17 years. So an investment in that second renewal bought them 17 years of engaged membership. That same investment or new member was 50% likely to be lost. And it's a lot of associations don't think about that way, but when they start thinking about it, they understand that investment in engagement and retention has a much higher ROI. And something that you can do as a takeaway here is sit down with your CFO and figure out what is the lifetime value of our members. It's not a difficult exercise, but it could be really eye-opening, both for you and for your CFO, frankly.
Right. So in our software world, like the way we look at membership growth and like things like this is that like our new customer acquisition actually has to be greater than churn. So if our new customer acquisition is not greater than our churn, then the company is losing money in general. So is there something like that in the association world that you would like want to touch on?
Yeah, I think you touched on it before. It costs, that's true, right? It's the difference between churn. There's 2 levers you can pull, right? I can acquire lots more new members, understanding I'm probably going to lose half or so of them, and keep doing that while I lose members on the other end. We call that the leaky bucket, right?
Yeah.
We could spend a lot of money filling up the top, and we just watch them pour out the bottom, oftentimes at the end of the very first year. That describes, I think, a lot of associations' experience. Or you can increase your retention, right? And save the members that you already have. And you'll see members grow and grow and grow. Renewal membership compounds. And I mentioned that a minute ago, right? A member that it renews once is more likely to renew twice, is more likely to renew the next time, the next time, the next time. So getting someone to renew once pays off year over year over year, much more efficiently than than a new member would. We find that it often costs 8 to 10 times to get a new member than it does to renew one. 8 to 10 times, if you want to think about that as an investment. So most people focus on the recruitment, which is what you have to do, without doing the mental math to understand that a 1% lift in renewal is a massive impact on the overall membership of the organization, much more so than a 1% lift in new member recruitment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Chris, then do you have a strategy to increase member engagement?
Yeah, the strategy that we recommend is a strategy that we developed with AARP over several years that we focus with them on these things. You don't have to have AARP's resources to do this. Very few people do, but we've seen this be effective over and over and over again. It's really our formula for increasing engagement and renewal. And the first key is to focus on year one, right? That the first year is really the most critical year to help them experience the right value, to have those right value experiences as early on as you can in the first year. Why is that? Because we know that first year members don't renew, right? In general, 50 to 60% of them will stay and the rest of them will leave. But there's a tipping point at the second renewal. So we found this with AARP, and we find this holds true almost everywhere we go, that after the first year, they're more likely to renew. Once they've renewed 2 or 3 times, they're very likely to renew for the duration, right? So that your goal is to get them over that tipping point as soon as you possibly can. So your biggest bang for the buck, if you will, is to engage them in the first year, right? To get them engaged with something they're going to want to continue again and again and again across the year. So that's really number one. The second one, it might be a little less intuitive, but it's to focus on the first 90 days of that first year, right? So you've got a whole year, but we find our research shows that you really only have their attention for 90 days. And you've really got their attention for the first 30, right? They've joined, they're excited, they're interested, they want to know what's in it for them. Their attention slowly wanes at 60 days. At 90 days, if you have not engaged them in a valuable experience, you probably won't, right? You've lost their attention, we find, until renewal time, where they start paying attention to you again and wondering whether they should renew or not. So there's really an imperative in your new member welcome stream and in your engagement communications that you give people the right opportunities to engage as soon as you possibly can, and that we call it the window of attention. And we even go so far as with a lot of organizations to call the first 90 days a no-fly zone, right? So, everyone wants the new member, right? All your partners want to market to them, and everyone in your organization wants to talk about their fun stuff. We often put a quiet zone around that period, so the only thing they hear from you is about member engagement, right? And the things that they can get value from. And we see really, really good results from that. Let's get them engaged in something that they want to be engaged in first, and then we can talk about all the other things that they can be involved in. Another piece of the strategy is, well, what should we offer them, right? What do we want to get them involved in of all the wonderful things that we do? And the truth is that not all engagements are created equal, right? Some things are much more engaging than others. And the way we measure that is how connected are they to renewal? So some engagements are much more predictive of renewal than other things. So to take an extreme, the most engaged members you have are the people on your board, right? They renew at almost 100%. Of course, they're going to do that. That's a high renewal. Someone who maybe opens your emails once in a while is engaged, but they're not engaged in a very meaningful way. So there's a continuum of engagement, and you can measure that by how well it's connected to renewal. And this is something that you can do right in your own association is, look at your renewals and look at what people have engaged in and ask yourself which engagements are most closely correlated with renewal over time. And what you will find is there will be a very small number It's the 80-20 rule of engagements that really get people bought in to the organization and renew. Often they're things that you can predict, right? They're the recurring products that you sell, insurance, for example. Perhaps it's volunteering, but those are the things that you really want to promote to people first, right? Those are the things that are going to be the stickiest for them over time. And it's really important to understand, because you can't talk about everything, because you really want them to pay attention, what things do you want them to pay attention to? And again, those things could be intangible. It's not always something that you have to sell them. We find the most engaging things are things that involve any kind of contribution from the member. So they could be buying something, they'd be giving you money, they could be giving you time, they could be donating content, right? Anything that gets them involved in contributing to the association tends to rank much higher on that engagement scale versus other things. So that we encourage you to do that, right? Analyze activity versus renewals to understand, what your most powerful engagements are. And the last component is to think about that engagement score we talked about early on, right? So we call it the loyalty ladder, right? From a member who has signed up and never done anything, right? To on the far right, the chairman of the board. There's a continuum in between there, and the very best associations score that, right? Based on the data that they have, they can assign each member a score on exactly how engaged are they, and they focus on the low scores, right? That's the key. People who are already engaged, we don't need to get them engaged. We just need to appreciate them. The folks that are scored low on engagement, that haven't done anything or haven't done anything meaningful, are the ones we really, really need to focus on. The goal being to, move them up the loyalty ladder. And that's something we would also encourage you to do as a takeaway is, try ranking your members by engagement and, see what that tells you about your membership. We're publishing a piece this month, actually, in associations now, called 3 Keys to Solving the Member Retention Puzzle, which talks about exactly about those things. How do you segment your membership effectively for engagement?
Right. I have 2 questions for you. So the first one being onboarding. You mentioned that the first 90 days like a no-fly zone where there's like no market, almost no marketing, and then we just focus on the association services and then like promote them, those to them. So is there an ideal onboarding experience that you recommend? Like, do we drip feed some of our content, or is there something else during that time?
Yeah. I mean, there absolutely is. There's a best practice model that you can work from. One good example, recent example, is work we did with American Lung Association on exactly this type of thing. The first experience was to inform, right? So let's tell them about the most important things that we're doing, the things that we think that we're going to be most interested in. They did the segmentation that we're talking about, right? And found that there are really 3 things members are interested in. They're interested in lung health, they're interested in smoking cessation, and they're interested in clean air. So those are the things we want to put in front of them and see what they bite on. Right. That will tell us what kind of member they are and what they want to hear from us about in the future. The second message was an invitation to participate. Do a climb with us, right? Come to an event, contribute some time to the organization. And then the third attempt was a donation, right? So to ask them to make a repeat donation over time. So you walk them up to those things, but there absolutely is a kind of tried and true way to invite them, make them feel welcome, but also kind of walk them up to the kind of engagement that's going to be most meaningful for them and for you.
So you mentioned that members who contribute in the first 90 days are likely to be more engaged, and different contributions are different. So is there like one tactic you can recommend that we can probably just like try, right? So and get the members to contribute something. Is there like a magic bullet, like a one tactic that works?
One thing that works often, and it's also something American Lung Association did, was surveys, right? So very quickly, I'm not talking about your 10-page member satisfaction survey, right? I'm talking about just a very quick maybe 5 to 6 question survey where you're asking members what they care about, right? What they're interested in and what their opinions are. You're going to get very high completion rates from that. They're going to feel heard. They're going to feel understood, and they'll be much more prone to pay attention to your messages after that. I mean, Lung Association implemented this strategy, and they increased their member list from 600 to 900,000 in 2 years. They had 50% growth, really
Wow.
just from doing an effective onboarding strategy.
That's amazing. And I guess like if we ask those little survey questions, we also get to know the member better. So we're also learning about the member and getting them engaged. So it's a win-win.
It is a win-win, and they're telling us how to segment them, right? They're telling
Yeah.
us what they're interested in. They're telling us what they want to hear about. And it's the beginning of that back and forth relationship where they feel valued and they're experiencing value, from you, the kind of value that they really want, that they were expecting when they joined.
Right. And I guess we have to save the segmentation data and actually use it later on when we are doing our marketing.
And that's a challenge, right? For a lot of associations, we mentioned earlier, they're really not tracking engagement. A lot of associations aren't tracking interests either. In all of our experience, the most effective way to segment members is based on their interests. And we want to be collecting those signals along the way, as many ways as we possibly can. So what emails are they looking at? What are they visiting on the website, right? What are they doing in our app, right? Just what are the clues that are telling us what kind of member they are and what the most effective way is for us to reach them.
And just to let the audience know, when you signed up for this particular webinar event, you kind of like followed a similar journey registering for the event. So on the registration page, there was a field where we asked you to ask a question about this event. So that is our way of like getting you engaged with our content. And then by you actually submitting that question, we also get to know what your interests are. So if you didn't realize that, now you know why we did all that.
Yeah. And it's really hard to overestimate the importance of that kind of segmentation. And that was a great example that you just gave. But really understanding your members based on their interests, not where they are in their career per se, not where they came from, but what is it that they really want. We posted a piece of Sidecar this month also that was, and then the title was, are you doing your member segmentation wrong? And most organizations are. We really encourage people to start collecting those signals, doing the data analysis to understand interest-based segmentation, and the results can be really dramatic. We did that work with the American Medical Association. Discovered there were really 4 big buckets of interests among physicians, built a content strategy around that, and they tripled their member growth rate the first year just by focusing on interest-based segmentation. So we're big believers in it, and encourage people, if you're not there, to start moving in that direction of really capturing what it is your members are interested in.
Right. And you mentioned engagement scores. So we can actually get really fancy and track engagement scores like down to like each member. And then, we can track every activity and whatnot. Now, I know that not all associations will be able to do that. And maybe there are like different ways of doing engagement scoring. So Chris, what do you recommend? Should we track every single member's engagement score, or do we put them in like broad buckets that highly engaged, medium, and low?
You don't need to track it down to the nth detail, right? You know, in the level of information that you can act on. So a good starting place would be the sort of highly engaged, only need love, right? At this point, you could track the sort of marginally engaged, need encouragement to move them across the line, and the utterly unengaged who need intervention, right? They're either not seeing the value or they don't know how to access it. And you can see how you could treat those 3 groups very, very differently. It's a very actionable strategy. And it doesn't require a lot of data science to do that. I mean, you could probably do this in Excel to look at your level of engagement. And that's a great place to start. You can get a lot fancier than that and sort of figure out where people are on the line, but it's really not necessary. You're going to get 80% of the bang, I think, if you can just segment them as simply as that.
Right. So, sorry.
You also don't need to track interest down to the nth degree either. I mean, most associations do hundreds of things, all of which are interesting, most of which you can probably collapse into 3 to 5 buckets. We encourage people to do that, and we encourage our listeners here, to do that, to go back and say, could you really logically bucket most of the things that you do into 3 to 5 big chunks of things that we can talk about, like lung association that we mentioned, right? Smoking cessation covers a lot of things. Lung disease covers a lot of things. Most associations, a big bucket could cover a lot of things, and that's the level at which you need to track it, right? What are the general categories, not, which specific topics are we interested in? It makes it much easier, and it makes it, a lot less daunting, I think, for folks who, maybe don't have extensive data resources to understand that, you really don't need this. right? That's the kind of segmentation that you can probably do on a whiteboard.
Right. Now, you mentioned the three main buckets. So do you have any thoughts on how can we, what messaging do we use for the three main buckets?
Yeah, certainly for the the highly engaged folks, it's really gratitude, right, and appreciation. Okay. Like, thank you for being such a great member. We really appreciate you. You're important to the organization, and maybe you invite them to volunteer, right, or to give back, or to contribute in some way. But they're probably already there.
Yeah.
The folks that are in the middle, right, acknowledge the fact that they've gotten some value out of it. Thank them for that, and then start presenting them with relevant ways to get more and more engaged based on what they've already done. Right. So if you know what they're interested in, they've signaled that to you, or we know that, they're interested in, particular kinds of content, serve them up more of that, right? The kind of content to sort of draw them, higher up the ladder. Again, remember, more engagements are better, right?
Yeah.
So, we have found in the research that, after, 2 engagements, they're starting to get pretty loyal. After 5 meaningful engagements, they will renew at almost 100%. And beyond 5%, those are the folks that really will renew themselves. Those are the ones that will call you and ask where their renewal notice is.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, your goal is to move them up that way, right? So we want to present the next best engagement to every member in that middle bucket to move them up to be one of our most loyal members. And the ones in the lowest bucket that aren't engaged, we need to understand, right? What is missing? Are we not communicating with them? Are we not communicating the right things to them? That's a good place to be asking them more questions, to be sending them surveys, to be testing things against them. How do we get them drawn in? Why did they join in the first place? What were they expecting from us, right? How can we make that easier for them to get? How can we make it easier for them to enjoy those things? Just to move them past that first engagement, right? That threshold of, they've done something that's delivered a meaningful experience of value. So three very separate messaging strategies that can all be delivered in one member journey.
Right. So for the least engaged membership, then would you recommend that maybe we start with a few phone calls, like one-on-one phone calls to understand what's going wrong, and then do a broader survey after that?
Yeah, if you have a small association and you can do that, that's fantastic. And we have clients that do that. We worked with a small association in Australia this year, focused on the disability sector, and they did a lot of their work by phone. And if after a month or so they hadn't seen meaningful engagement from people, it would be a phone call, right, to understand. And it was massively successful, right? Massively successful because often they were just confused, right? They didn't understand how to find it or how to use it or how to decide what would be most valuable from them from this huge menu of things that people offered. So that's ideal if you can do it. Larger associations can't afford to do that kind of thing. That's where surveys can be helpful. That kind of research can be helpful. That's where message testing can be really, really helpful. Let's try some different messages and see what's really going to stick with these folks over time. And what you'll learn is the same message will work again and again and again. And that'll become your control messaging.
Right. So, Chris, what we have also found is that for larger associations, we don't have to make 200 phone calls, but if you make 10 phone calls one-on-one to begin with, right, this really informs the survey that we're going to send out to the broader audience. So what are the challenges? What are some of the issues, right? So then so the first few, the 4 or 5 phone calls will be new information. And then it starts to become repetitive that I'm hearing the same thing again and again, right? So these are problems. Then maybe when we send out the broader survey, we can include those questions or those challenges in the survey. Are you worried about this, or is this happening to you too?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that makes a ton of sense. And, we see the same thing, that you very quickly start hearing the same things over and over again. And those are the insights. We've also seen people use those kind of intervention techniques as the 90 days approaches, right? At the end of that 90-day window, they're now at risk, right? We call those are our at-risk members. They haven't engaged. They're not going to renew. What can we do, now to make sure that they're experiencing value early in the membership? Phone calls can be great from that. Messages from other members can be great for that, right? So
that's right.
Special offers or experiences. That's kind of when you pull out all the stops. Is early on. The mistake people make is they wait until right before renewal to do that, and that's about 9 months too late.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So Chris, talk about like using your existing member base, so the highly engaged members in like driving engagement for the like least engaged members. Is there a process where we can make that happen?
Yeah, there's a couple ways I think you can use, your existing, you can use your existing members. For one, members listen far more to other members than they listen to us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They can say the exact same thing and it will sound like, genius, and we say it and it sounds like just another, marketing email. So certainly having them carry the message for you can be very attention getting way for them to do that. Personally inviting them into things can also be good. This is where you have sections or you have local chapters that create a good environment for that. We've seen that be really, really successful at large associations, that a lot of that happens at the section level, right? Inviting people in, hey, come to this event, right? Hey, so-and-so is speaking, you're really going to be interested in that. I think that you should come. It can be an email, sometimes it can be a phone call, but the personal invitation, it probably is the most successful thing of all, quite honestly. And even just telling members stories in the messaging is really, really compelling. That's another thing that AMA has done really successfully, is sort of tell the stories of, real physicians doing, real medicine and how the AMA is their ally in patient care. So we encourage that a lot, not just to have your current members do work for you, which is always a good thing, but even just telling their stories can be so much more compelling than talking about something, in the abstract.
Right. So Chris, then if you were to design the ideal member experience, what are some of the common services that you see are actually working? So we often hear about like continuing education, community of peers, connecting with your like peers, training, right? So are there other services that you think are working?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The answer is it really depends, and it's not the same for every member.
Right.
So, for some, it's the event. For a lot of small associations, the event is the magnet. It's sort of the number one thing. And it's perfectly appropriate to concentrate all your firepower, right, on getting people to come to the event, which is where all the value gets delivered. That happens in smaller associations. A lot of members are really motivated by other members, right? It's the connection, it's the networking, it's the face-to-face, the interpersonal, and there's a million ways that you can facilitate that for them. For others, it's, they want to participate. So these are your grassroots people, right? These are your volunteer people that you want to bring them into. Rather than picking one thing to emphasize, again, we encourage you to try to understand what type of member you're dealing with. What are the top 4 or 5 things you have to offer them like that, and getting the right ones in front of the right members at the same time, right? It's sort of what are your big bang value experiences? Come to the local chapter meeting, come to our event, join this grassroots campaign with us, or, maybe it's a particularly valuable piece of content for them that, that you can emphasize. That's a much more effective approach than sort of a one size fits all onboarding experience.
Right. I like what you said, Chris, that some associations find that like the events are where the engagement happens. So, and if that is the case, then you should actually combine all your firepower into that like one funnel. Can you can you share a bit more about that?
Downside of that is COVID, right? If you put all your pennies on your event, then you're going to be in trouble. Hopefully that will never happen to us again. We have found that a lot of associations, people, the event is what they know about. It's probably how they found out about you in the first place. They're going to come back again and again. Events are tricky because they're generally not members only. So it's not really a benefit of membership per se. Maybe they get the discount. Nevertheless, it's the way members can really experience the value all at the same time, right? They get to be with other members. They get to hear new original content. They get to see what's happening in the industry. Perhaps they get to deliver a paper or deliver their content, get their ideas out in the world. So it's a really concentrated experience for people who like that. There are members that would not go to an event on a bet, right?
Yeah.
They hate those things and they would never, ever go to them. And if all you're promoting is the event, they're not going to be very engaged with you. You have to have other alternatives for people who are, not of the event mindset to experience that value in a different way. It helps now that so many more events are virtual, to be honest, and short form. So somebody's not willing to take 4 days to go to Las Vegas to go to your convention, but they'll take 4 hours out of their day to hear a really interesting conversation or really interesting presentation, or a part of one. So that sort of event, mentality is much more actionable now than I think it was pre-COVID, right? We've all discovered Zoom for better or worse. But I think you can leverage that to your advantage with your members.
Right. So speaking of Zoom, Chris, what are your thoughts on the role of technology in driving member engagement?
Technology is everything, right? I mean, if you think about everything that we've talked about, it's all driven by data, and it's all delivered digitally, right? So, having a digital platform that can become a content engine for you, that's getting the right kind of content in front of the people at high frequency is really, really key. The organizations we've talked about today, they're really successful, the AARPs and the AMAs of the world, their member websites are content machines, right? They're creating unique, high value content every day that people do not want to miss and that they want to come back with. That's technology, right? That's having a great digital experience. That's having really smart content management. All of that's technology enabled. All of the segmentation and targeting we're talking about is driven by data, right? You have to have, excellent member database with good analytics capabilities, sort of sitting on top of it. And you have to have marketing automation that works, right? So, whatever that might be for you, that's going to be a Salesforce or a Marketo or any smaller, you have to have the ability to do these kind of automated, member journeys and experiences so you can, deliver on the segmentation and make sure people are getting the right messages in the right stream. So, much more so even than I think just a few years ago, as people move more and more digitally, their expectations of digital experience are much higher. And the technology really is everything. We haven't seen anyone succeed in this space without making significant investments in the things that we just talked about.
Right. So Chris, like in our association journey, like the clients that we work with, like we recommend like 3 key pieces of technology. So it's their public facing website, that is like the recruitment marketing site for prospective members. And then we have this internal facing membership website, which our product Member Launch does, right? And then paired with a very good CRM, right? And that will actually like be the database to store all the data, engagement scores, and things like that. Plus, I think like we also have the AMS for association management day to day, right? So, so how would you combine this in an ideal way?
Yeah, that's the perfect ecosystem that you described right there, right? So your public website is your magnet. It has really compelling content that draws people into the join experience. Once they're joined, you pay off on that with this member portal web experience that's exposing, the high value experiences that you have to offer. You're tracking all that through your CRM system, collecting all the signals that we've talked about that tell you, what's going to be most valuable to the member. And then all that's tied together by, your AMS system, which tracks actual engagement, right? So what are they doing? What are they coming to? When all those things are working together really well, that's when you start to see your engagement numbers really, really climb. We started the podcast by saying, a good first year experience can add, 8 to 12 points to your first year renewal. That's massive, right? That's massive. Yeah. That only happens if you have the kind of technology ecosystem that you just described.
Right. And I got a sidebar question from Sherry Beck. She was asking me, our AMS does not offer engagement scoring. Is there a manual way?
Yeah, you can do it in Excel. I mean, to be really honest, it's definitely better than nothing. And you can do it yourself. I mean, if you can, run the reports on the kinds of things people are engaged in, you can cluster them yourselves, sort of in Excel, and it'll give you a very directional look at it, honestly, of what things are most important. Ideally, it would be great to move to a system that does that for you automatically. But even a manual approach to that is way better than nothing, and it will probably be really eye-opening.
Right. And also like what we found is that oftentimes we try to do too much using the one tool that we have. Like if you have an AMS, we try to use the AMS for everything. If we even build a like organization website with the AMS, right? And then we end up with like a mediocre experience on the web front of things. And then like if you have a CRM, we try to do everything in the CRM, right? We try to make the CRM the membership website, right? But really like these technologies, they are like good at doing one thing really well, and these will not do everything for you. So you probably have to like combine different pieces of technology together to actually deliver a good experience.
Well, you know what they say, right? If all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's, you're absolutely right that there is no one system that does all of those things, really, really well. There are AMS systems that have CRM functionality built into them that it's not going to be as good as what you're going to get in a standalone CRM. and ditto for a member digital experience. You can do that in some AMS systems. It will not be as good, right, as something that you would get from a standalone platform, something like Grype, for example.
Right. So Chris, like talking about all the different technologies and tools, I think like we're looking at some amount of budget, like investment, to actually make this happen. So do you have a formula or ratio that you recommend, like how much to invest in engagement technology in general?
I mean, it's not the answer you want, but the answer is as much as it takes, right? I mean, there's a floor of just what it takes to do this right. It's a capital investment. It's a long-term investment from the association. You're not going to succeed without it. The good news about engagement and all the research that we have on that is there is just an airtight business case for doing that, right? That you can take to your board. The ROI from increasing engagement is so obvious and so strong. If you present the numbers in the right way, it's almost an offer that they can't refuse. I think a lot of boards don't believe it. They don't buy into it. They don't understand the value of engagement. But when they see the numbers, they do, right? They really have to. That investing whatever it takes to get engagement where it needs to be will change the slope of your membership dramatically for now and forever. So, we love to do those kinds of business cases because they're so obvious ultimately when people see them, and they justify the kind of investments that you make. But there's really no workaround. There's no way to kind of cheap out on it. You either have the baseline technology to do this, or you don't.
Right. You mentioned there is a good way of presenting it to your board to get the buy-in. Like, what is your secret?
I don't think there's a secret. I think it's, lifetime value is really the key to it, to helping them understand. Right. That increased engagement does increase renewal, not a little bit, but a lot. That increased renewal increases membership, not a little, by a lot. And that increases lifetime value. So there's hard dollars to be made, from these investments that we make up front. And that's a very, very easy story to tell. That's a very easy PowerPoint to put together. And boards will understand that they've probably just never heard the story told that way. I don't think there's a secret. I think it's just telling the story in the right way. So they understand what we've been talking about in this podcast, which is, a small investment in engagement pays off again and again and again. In renewal and membership.
Right. Okay. So I'll jump into some audience questions at this point. So Cheryl Farrow is asking, we will never have all the members fully engaged. So where do you focus our efforts?
That's a good example. Really good question. You focus on here's your choices, right? Focus on your first year members first, right? Get as many of them engaged as you get as many as you possibly can. Focused on your at-risk members next, right? The ones that are close to or just past that 90-day window that haven't necessarily been engaged, and then focus on moving folks up the ladder, right? But I would nail the first two before you start working on the last, right? Figure out how to do the very best job you can engaging new members, then start thinking about your at-risk members, and then start thinking about everyone else. Your biggest bang for the buck is going to be new member engagement, for sure.
Right. So I think like when we think about member engagement and retention, our knee-jerk reaction often is, okay, who are the members at risk? Can we actually call them or email them right away, right? So does that work, or do you really recommend like the new members, like going after the new members first?
Going after the new members for sure, right? And it may take 2 or 3 years, honestly, for you to really perfect that welcome stream, but it's absolutely worth it. It will absolutely pay off. At-risk members are harder. I mean, right?
They're harder,
You tried to get their attention and you didn't. You put your offer in front of them and they didn't bite. And you don't know why, right? Why is it that they didn't? Did they just not like what they saw? So there's a lot more guesswork involved in it. You can do win back. You can do recapture for sure. We were very successful at American Lung Association, doing that. We were able to recover 7% of their lapsed members. But it's a completely different strategy, for how do you get those people back into the fold when, essentially they've already abandoned you.
Right. So if we are starting today and we don't have a lot of budget, then like we have a question from Liz Urban. Are there simple tactics that can be implemented with little cost and effort?
Yeah, there are, absolutely. The data analysis that we've talked about, everything I've mentioned, you can take the first shot at yourself, right?
Yeah.
You can do that kind of scoring. You can do the segmentation. You can do the analysis with the resources that you have. I promise you, right? You can do it in Excel or in Google Sheets, working with your IT people. There's much fancier ways to do that. And ultimately you will want to do that, but you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on just doing some, kind of homegrown data analysis. So we recommend that. If you don't have a basic welcome stream in place, stop listening to this podcast and go build one. You absolutely have to have that. And again, it doesn't have to be expensive or resource intensive. You have an email system already. You're doing CRM some way or another. Optimize that for your new members so you're drawing them into the engagement experiences as early as you can. And then the other thing I suggest is, pick a couple high value segments and start testing into them, right? What are your highest value engagements? Is it, are those your event attendees, or is that your, insurance buyers, whatever it might be, and start trying stuff, right? What are ways that we can get more people on those bandwagons over time? And you don't have to smack it out of the park the first time out. You just have to make kind of incremental progress towards really mastering how to get those segments engaged. So those are places that I would start that, don't require massive investments. They just require focus and attention.
Okay. Our next question is from Vicky White. I think we already answered this, but this is such a great question. I'll ask it anyways. So Vicky is asking, what does the data show about members who don't engage at all in the first 6 months?
Yeah, that's a great question. The data shows they're probably not going to renew. I mean, that's what it shows. And it doesn't take 6 months. If they haven't renewed at 3, you've probably lost them. And honestly, we would start treating them at that point as lapsed members, which may sound a little bit crazy, but you can either start working on that now, or you can wait for them not to renew and start working on it then. But in our experience, the data is very solid that people who have not actively engaged with you that long are probably not going to, and you really need to take a different approach. And we have clients that do that will actually start something that looks a lot like win back, at 4 or 5 or even 6 months to get those folks back engaged, because it's just wishful thinking, honestly, that renewal time is going to come around and they're suddenly going to wake up.
Right. So next question is from Eric Beckman, and I think Eric is here today. So Eric is asking, how can we best engage members so that they retain themselves? What an amazing question.
Yeah, I know. We promised that in the title, didn't we? I should probably say something about that. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but the truth is multiple engagements, right? To stack one engagement across the other. We have found that initially in work we did with AARP, we've tested it again and again and again with other clients, that the more different high value things member engage in, the more likely they are to renew, right? So if you have someone who has your credit card and they buy your insurance product and they volunteer for your local chapter, right, and they come to your events and they write articles for your journal, that person's going to renew themselves, right? Because it just means too much to them. There's too much of you wrapped up in their life for them to let go of. And when I say that folks that have 5, 6, 7 meaningful engagements with you renew at almost 100%, I mean that. I mean, literally 99.9% of those people are going to renew year after year after year. So the strategy to get people to renew themselves is to get them more and more engaged over time, to the point where you almost don't have to ask them to renew. You should ask them to renew, but you almost don't have to ask them.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the tactic for that as well. Like, try to capture what their interests are as early as possible. That way, what type of services they will engage in, and then get them to engage in those services.
Absolutely, and at the same time, understand what your high value engagements are and get those in front of them. Right. So offer them the 4 or 5 things that are most likely to be valuable and that are going to be the stickiest in terms of membership. Work hard at getting them involved in those things, and they will find their way to the other things, right? That's what your member portal is for. They will find the other value that you have. But there are things they really want that you really want them to have. Those are the things that you want to be putting them in front of. Aligned with their interests, if you're paying attention, right, to what the signals are and what they're telling you. That's really the ideal universe, is you're giving them exactly what they're interested in a way that's going to be very, very sticky for you. That's the holy grail.
Yeah. All right. Next question is from Shannon McCormick. So Shannon is asking, if your goal is to expand membership to underrepresented communities, how would you find out like what needs they have that you're not currently meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question too. It's a slightly different topic, but I'm glad that you asked it. Qualitative research, right, is the only way that you're going to get to that. We're huge believers in that. We're huge believers that in almost every membership context, that qualitative research is the most valuable kind of research that you can do. But in that situation, you really have to get out in the community. You have to talk to those people in a structured, sort of scientific way to suss out what their needs really are. I don't think there's another way there's just no other way to do it. You got to sit down and talk to them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Next question is from Emilia Shape. She's asking, how do you deal with Zoom fatigue when hosting events? We want to keep our members engaged, but there's so much Zoom like happening for schoolwork and like with us. So how do you deal with Zoom fatigue?
You mean Zoom fatigue like this podcast?
Yes.
I'm joking. That's also a really great question. And we have clients that have been super creative about that and have really, really great results. You have to change your format. I mean, that's the bottom line. No one wants to sit through a day-long Zoom meeting, believe me, right? 4 hours is too long for a Zoom meeting anymore. So they're going to really, really short form stuff, right? We have one client that it's half hour. They do it at 8 o'clock in the morning. They call it coffee and connect. And people can hop on, they listen to 10 minutes of somebody smart talking, and they have 20 minutes of open conversation, and it's fantastic. And people love it, and no one minds zooming into something like that. That's another common format. People go to 40 minutes. Again, you've got maybe 15 minutes of content, half an hour of discussion. You have to make it interactive, and you have to make it shorter. There's really no other way. There's really no other way that I've seen to do it, but I've been impressed on how creative people can get within that parameter, right? This you have 40 minutes max of their attention.
Yeah.
And you have to let them talk. You can't, just talk at these people they've actually it's been encouraging, much better results from those events than they did from live events. That people would come to, maybe a couple hundred people would come to a one-day seminar, but they can get a couple thousand people to come, to a really well done virtual event. So it's an opportunity, as well as a burden, that we have to do so many of these things by Zoom.
Right. Makes sense. My last question for today is from Rebecca Thomas. So Rebecca is asking how to build a membership communication strategy.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to what we've been talking about. I think you need to segment your membership. That's the first place that you need to go. You need to segment it by interests, and then you need to develop systematic ways to speak to each one of those segments to draw them into the value that you have to offer. Right. So, specific phases of the journey, you have to have a new member welcome. You have to have an engagement stream for folks that aren't engaged. You have to have a really effective, renewal stream. It has to be segmented and it has to be focused on high value opportunities. I mean, those are really the building blocks, and those are the things that we've been talking about. But if you do those things well, and it becomes a well-oiled machine for you, you will see the results on membership, right? It will be it will feel easy to you, and the membership will increase. The challenge is, testing into that to really get it right and really perfect it. And that would be our recommendation is, it has to be a segmented approach. You have to focus on a small handful of high value things, and you have to do it in a really systematic way that's designed to reach specific goals that you have, right? Join, engage, renew.
Right. So, Chris, we are running out of time. So what would be your key takeaway for our audience today? If there's one thing.
If there was one key takeaway today, invest in engagement. I mean, quite honestly, right? You do not underestimate the value of engagement. The compound value of engagement on renewal. Almost every association undervalues it, and they shouldn't. And that would be the takeaway. Do the analysis, do the math. Talk to your CFO, understand what the upside really is, and then make the kind of investments that you have to make. That would be my takeaway from today.
Wonderful. Chris, can you share a personal habit that has contributed the most to your success?
Yes, I can. Invest in your network. Invest in your personal network. Take some time every day. Tell somebody happy birthday. Make an introduction to somebody. Ask somebody how they're doing. Over time, I have... we built a consulting business for 20 years, almost without marketing at all, right? Based on the strength of our personal network. I mean, it is not only is it great for business, it's also good for your soul, right? Because it
Yeah.
lets you cultivate relationships with other people. So that would be the personal habit I credit the most, honestly, is just taking the time to invest in the people in my life, and the network that I've developed.
Right. Okay. Also, I think travel helps as well.
Well, then there's that.
Yeah, there's that, exactly. Alrighty. Yeah. So Chris, how can people reach out to you if they have more questions?
You can find me at sequenceconsulting.com is our website, or email chris@sequenceconsulting.com. I would love to hear your questions and love to talk to you more about engagement.
Alrighty. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
Alrighty. That was the episode with Chris today. And as always, like I say, that we come to these events and we actually have a lot to take away from the podcast and webinars that we attend, but nothing happens until you actually start executing and start taking action on some of the ideas. So I would invite our audience to kind of find one idea that you can implement immediately. And I think Chris gave you a lot. So find one idea that you can implement as soon as you can and start to see the result as quickly as you can. So that was the episode for today. Thank you so much for joining us for the live episode. And if you're joining us later, once again, if you want to learn more about how to grow your association membership, we have a number of events online. So you can find our events at grype.ca/events. And also our member launch product is one of the quickest way for you to build a membership website for your association and get your member engagement on autopilot. So if you don't know what member launch is, please check it out on our website. Alrighty. So once again, thanks so much for being amazing and joining us for the episode today. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.